All right, we are live, episode 2, week 2 of Eat, Pray, Limbs. I don't know if we even explained what the limbs part of that means. It might be my favorite English expression. It's just like when you score, you're celebrating, arms up, limbs everywhere. So when you win your bets, it's fucking limbs. And we're back again. So it is Dan who's coming to us. He's Nottingham Dan via New York, who's now in Nashville. So Dan, welcome back.
Yeah, good to be here live from a hotel room somewhere in Nashville.
Just doing hotspots. That's dedication right there. Hotspot on the cell phone. And then we got Sam's Army via Chicago in Michigan. So everybody's spread out all over the place. I'm going to Connecticut, but the boys are back. Sam, how you doing?
Good to be here. It's the Prem is back, so I'm excited.
The Prem is back, and I gotta say, last weekend that was like a welcome to the Premier League weekend across all fronts. Obviously, Forest they might have had the worst weekend of anybody besides West Ham, just from an appearance standpoint. It was very ugly against Newcastle, and then also from my bets, like I gave out the parlay that I liked. Villa really let me down. That killed that bet. And it's not like anything else was going that well for me either. So week 1 in the books. That's just it's just a learning phase. We're still in the transfer window, but it was for me a rough opening weekend. Dan, how did you see the Forest game going?
Yeah, it was kind of everything we hadn't hoped for and everything we kind of knew might happen. But it's week 1, as you say. There's 37 more of them to go, and there's going to be many more weekends like that for us. But I'm just hoping we get a few of the good ones sooner rather than later.
And then, anything stand out for you from week 1 there, Sam?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think a lot of the games went about how you'd expect, right? Like City just absolutely trounced West Ham. I don't know if people really expected that, but just City's so scary. So they basically confirmed all our fears about them, especially with Haaland scoring twice. We were just
wagging.
We're in for a real world of hurt if you're not a City fan. Arsenal kind of went to plan. Tottenham about went to plan. There were some shockers though. We actually all agreed that we at least Bournemouth and Fulham, we didn't really like them going into that first week, and both of them pulled out results. Fulham got the shocking draw to get this, Saturday started off real early and real wild against Liverpool, and then Bournemouth pulled a shocker and won against Villa. So those were the 2 games that really stood out to me as kind of like, wow. And, people probably will say the United Brighton fits in that category as well, but United's such a mess right now that nothing shocks me with them.
Huge mess. And I think that was another element of the welcome to the EPL moment for myself and probably for a lot of Forest fans. I think if you were just looking at teams on paper and looking at how active they were this summer in the transfer window, you would say like, hey, like I probably like Forest to finish highest of the 3 promoted teams with Bournemouth and Fulham. And they looked by far the worst. And maybe it was a little bit of, now both of those Fulham and Bournemouth were both at home. Obviously, going to St. James Park, which is what Forest had to do up at Newcastle, very difficult. But seems like they kept their team together more so. That they might have had a little bit more cohesion as Forest is breaking in a million new players and more players still every day. So that's part of I think that was part of the equation. But it was like if you're one of these teams that's going to be in the relegation battle and right out of the gates, you're looking at 2 teams that you're hoping to finish above. Each got results in places that you wouldn't anticipate. Tough start for the lads.
Long season, Chief. Long season.
Yeah, long season, and I feel like it's going to come together. Forest added a Champions League caliber midfielder this week with Remo. Say his name for me, Dan. Get his name going.
Friula. I just call him Remo.
Remo. Yeah, I like Remo. And then Emmanuel Dennis. And then do you have any insight? He was with Watford last year. This is another thing where it's like, I just don't understand the money that flies around. Morgan Gibbs-White, he's valued over 40 million, apparently a $40 million offer or plus 42 million, something like that. Not enough. And then you look at what you get for Emmanuel Dennis, which is sounding like in the 15 to 17 range with bonuses. who was an established, again, a young player, but put in goals, for a team that wasn't very good. I think he had 10 goals and 6 assists, which is more than guys who were, who was the kid from Leeds who got Rafinha, right? And he had about the same numbers. He went for way more money. So none of this stuff, the EPL the transfer windows drive me insane. None of it makes any sense to me.
So that's the desperation of the championship teams, though, as well, right? So you can do what you want in the Premier League. The moment your team gets relegated and they need the money, it becomes a buyer's market. So you look at Morgan, Gibbs White, and Rafinha. They were at Premier League teams who didn't need to let them go unless the money is right.
Yeah.
Watford are in a situation where they've got parachute payments, but shoes on the other foot now. It was Forest for 23 years having their players stolen off them for under market value. So finally we get to do a bit of that.
Yeah. And let me just point out, by the way, Chief, some of these, sums of money that are being thrown around for guys like Cucurella and the sort of the rumors about Wesley Fofana from Leicester. Like, the amount of money that these players are going for is insane. It is legitimately insane. Like, the market is just as, we had this sort of pause with the pandemic and everything, but it's right back to being.
Yeah. What recession?
Crazy.
What recession?
Crazy numbers.
It's insane. And that's the other element where it's just like, well, that's just for the right to pay him $200,000 a week or whatever the number ends up being. It's like, we're going to pay you this much money just so we can pay you more. The way that they do business over there is fascinating, and I love it. And I'm glad it's there because Forest needed all these new guys, and now they're on their way to new signing number 17 of the window. So it might take them a little while to gel. But this is kind of a big week for them. Back home in City Ground, first game, I would say, since 1999 in the Premier League. So the place will be buzzing. I think you'll get a little bit of a rebound game, but it's going to take some time for this team to gel. Why don't we get into the weekend? Sam, we'll give our Forest picks a little bit later. Sam, what games are jumping out to you? Obviously, you have the big one. I jumped the gun. I misread the schedule for a moment last week. That was the problem. We got Tottenham and Chelsea this weekend. Your Spurs, how are you feeling about them heading into this game, which is the marquee game of the week?
Oh, without a doubt, this is the game that everybody will have eyes on. It's huge. Tottenham have, let's just be honest, been terrible anytime we've gone to Stamford Bridge. They just dominate us. And, so the history is not on our side. I've been saying for weeks now that the vibes are not right at Chelsea. They didn't look good in that first week against a woeful Everton. They needed a penalty to sort of squeak out a 1-0 win. So the fact that Tottenham is, I think, plus 230 to win that game.
Plus 225 on the Barstool Sports.
I am all over that. I think that Tottenham, that first week of games, how much to take away from those games like Fulham and Liverpool, Villa, Bournemouth, I'm not exactly sure. But based on what I see talent-wise from the two teams, Tottenham's a better team. They're just a better team. So I think that we go in there. It's my top pick, like my number one moneymaker of the week. I got Tottenham going into Chelsea and winning that game.
I'm right there with you. I have that one circled. Look, and it is like a little bit when it was 5-0 on aggregate between the two games last year with these teams, where Chelsea was the better dominant team. It does feel different. It does feel different. They're another team that seems like they're late movers a little bit in the window, and they don't know there's some. And maybe it's just my Americanness being hyper-focused on Christian Pulisic, but it's like he doesn't have a place in the team. Those rumors are starting to fire up again. So it just seems like it's the wrong time for Chelsea to be having a marquee matchup. And you can make an argument that other than City, Spurs looked the best of anybody in the EPL last week.
Yeah, I think that I attribute that a lot to Southampton being absolute dog shit in that game, and who knows if they're going to figure it out, but they looked just really bad. So I don't want to give Spurs too much credit for that, but they did look good.
You wouldn't. You wouldn't want to do that.
No, I wouldn't feel comfortable giving Spurs too much credit. But I love this. I love this, how it's set up. Getting +2 whatever for Spurs.
225.
Love it.
Dan, to you.
So picking another game out. So that was one on my list as obviously big games for the entertainment factor this weekend.
Well, the other one that I'm going to let's stick on that game for a second. Well, if you have anything on that game specifically.
So I'm not taking anything on that one, but I am going to take something, if you don't mind me moving on to Southampton Leeds.
Okay. Sure. Mm-hmm.
So just as mentioned, obviously Spurs did a number on Southampton last week, and Leeds managed to get a result against Wolves in those kind of mid-table clashes. So I think the Southampton-Leeds game is setting up quite nicely, because I honestly think Southampton are probably the worst team in the league. Based on last week and also recruitment. I see a smirk there from Sam, apart from Forest maybe. But I think Leeds are going to continue their early season form, and I think Southampton are going to struggle. So even though it's an away game, and even though Leeds aren't one of my favourite teams, the two that I'd kind of picked out to watch certainly were Chelsea, Spurs, and Southampton, Leeds. And I'm going to put Leeds to beat Southampton in a 2-game parlay with Arsenal to beat Leicester. I think Leicester fell apart last week against Brentford, and I think they're going to struggle this year as well. So Arsenal at home to beat Leicester and Leeds to go away to Southampton and win, and I think that's around 350.
I like it. What scares me about Leeds is it actually sort of plays with some of my other picks for the week, but I like sort of bounce back narrative bets. And Leeds, I can't pick Leeds to lose to Southampton because that would be a terrible loss. But they do fit with like the bounce back strategy of Southampton having just an awful first game. Leeds having a pretty good win, a solid win there over Wolves in the first week, and then sort of those things coming full circle, and maybe Southampton bouncing back and Leeds taking a step back. But I'm not gonna do it. I like that you're going with Leeds. But so my narrative picks are Villa. So they're at home. They're coming off of that, a pretty terrible loss to Bournemouth. Yep. I got Villa at home against a woeful Everton squad. And you could basically say Everton only losing 1-0 against Chelsea last week was kind of a win for them. So I'm gonna take Villa to bounce back. It's -124 is last I saw it at. Yep. So Villa to win, going away 124, and then Wolves. I just mentioned that they lost to Leeds. I think they bounce back, and they play at home against a Fulham team coming off of a huge result for them. So I got Wolves at plus money to win that game. I'm not that high on Wolves this season, but I think in that game against the Fulham team that they did play well. I got to give them credit in that Liverpool game, and Mitrovic looks like an absolute just beast. But I like Wolves. I'm going Wolves, and I'm going Villa in sort of bounce back games.
All right, so I was with you until you got to the Wolves thing. I think they're in trouble. And if you look at some of their analytics from last year, they were based on expected goal differential, which is not everything, and they got good goaltending last year. They would have been relegated based on that stat. So they concede a lot more chances than they generate. Fulham, I think they might have a little bit of that spark. They look. I mean, I know Liverpool slept well. I was watching that game, and I'm like, who's more tired right now, me at 6 a.m. or Liverpool? They were sleepwalking through that game. But I like a double chance on this one. So I like Fulham to either draw or win, and that's -162. I think that the same thing, the cohesion. I think the chances that Wolves kind of concedes on a consistent basis going to last year, seems like they haven't figured out their own attack yet. I feel like this is a spot again for Fulham, a team that I would have, that I did bet that they would get relegated, is heading, maybe towards a position where they might be in a fight, but you start this way, things go a little bit better. And I am with you on Villa. Villa is, if they lose this game, then they're venturing into that "you're dead to me" category, because they never should have lost last week. Like, they're supposed to be one of those, teams right smack dab in the middle of the table that you would think would take care of business. But going back home, I do like that. So I like Fulham. I like Spurs. I'm interested to see what you guys think about Newcastle, and if they're a team that's for real, like a team that could finish in that top 7. or if I was just like blinded by, oh, they dominated my team, so it must be pretty good.
This is a really good game this week for Brighton hosting Newcastle. These are two teams that, coming off of good wins. They are teams that, I probably underestimated Brighton for like the 20th year in a row. I always do it. I figured they were losing, Cucurella, they're losing Yves Bissouma to Spurs. I thought maybe they were going to take a step back. They looked like they were just as good, if not better, coming out of the gate here against United. And then Newcastle is a team that I've had sort of pushing up the table up further than a lot of people seem to think. Great game. I would go with Newcastle if I had to go one way or the other. I just think they're a little bit better team. But yeah, that Brighton, it should just be a really entertaining game, actually.
I would put that as my. Go ahead, Dan.
No, I was going to say on that parlay I have with Arsenal and Leeds both to win, I was flirting with the idea of adding Newcastle into that. I just think that game's potentially got a draw written on it, though. I think both of them, you can't look past Brighton just because of the quality of the coach. And I think in both cases, right, if it was at Newcastle, I think that bet would be on. But with it being at Brighton, I think that's got score draw written on it. So I'm leaving that off the parlay, but I think that's going to probably be the most entertaining game of the weekend.
Yeah, don't mind that draw bet. That looks good.
I like the double chance on that too, and I'm going with some double chances as a way to juice up the numbers for a parlay a little bit here that we'll get to. But Newcastle or draw, which I'm Newcastle, it was impossible, and I know Forrest was a big part of the equation last week. It was impossible not to be impressed by Newcastle, and really that's another thing. I mentioned what Wolves did at the end of last year. Newcastle, the second half of last year, was a dominant side that they took care of basically everybody, especially at home, but took care of basically everybody except for Liverpool and Man City. So that form just looks like it's continuing. They're getting stronger, and so Newcastle or draw is minus 175. So if I give you guys, I have a four-teamer. I love the board this week, and I think you might have talked me into Leeds. I think you might have talked me into Arsenal as well. But my four-teamer, it was a double chance with Fulham or draw, minus 162. Spurs money line, plus 225. The Newcastle or draw line has actually moved against me since I wrote it down. It's now at minus 175. Villa minus 124 at home. That four-teamer gets you to plus 1,400. So that, to me, and Dan, like you're a guy who traditionally likes to do the parlays and swing for the fences. This, I think I'm getting on board with that for this week too, just because every single thing I'm looking at, I'm like salivating at the start of at Saturday morning. I'm going to have a nice breakfast, put the bets in, and then I'm going to be out on the golf course for a lot of it on Saturday. But I feel like by the 9th hole, I'm going to be richer because those games will be decided. And I feel good about, as bad as it was last week. And I had no fun last week. Like the EPL sucked last week. So lost bets, Forrest lost. But this week this is like my cycle where it's like I'm an optimist by nature and I get going and it's like I just talk myself into these different games. And I think that four-teamer, I think that's got some money written all over it.
He's back. The optimism is back. One week can't hold you down.
Yeah,
literally eat, pray, limbs. By the way, you just described, a Saturday eat, pray, limbs.
Yeah, a little bit of this, and we're going to be good to go. Should we talk about? We want to get to Forest now too, Dan. We'll go quickly. What do you like about that game, West Ham? This one to me is like you mentioned that you don't like Leeds is not one of your teams. Like you have teams that you just hate, right? Who is on that hate list right now for you?
It's growing. There's a few hangovers from the Championship that have come up over the years. So Brentford are on there for their love of XG and everything stats. Bournemouth because they threw the game last year and cancelled it. And then I've got a long list of Premier League ones going back over the years. Liverpool are obviously top of that. Leeds on there for historical reasons. I started writing a list the other day to put on Twitter, and I think it contained like 16 teams.
You got to make a list of teams you don't hate.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's about 4. Maybe there's 4. But for the game though, I think the exciting thing for me is given last week's game, and I probably wasn't to be unexpected. But this is at home. Cooper always plays attacking football. So I think one way or another, we're going to go for it. We've got to try and win the home games. heard an interview with Dane Murphy this week saying, win the home games and be a bastard on the road. And I think that's what we've got to do. So we'll be going all out for the exactly. So we'll be going all out for the 3 points. I think we'll concede because we're new to the Premier League and West Ham are good. So I'm the only bet that I'm putting on that one is Forest to win and both teams to score at plus 650.
Okay, I like that. I've got a lot of things on that game. So it's the Jesse Lingard revenge game. West Ham's at the top of my list for people that I hate in the Premier League, and it has everything to do with the being in the mud with they're mutants. The West Ham fans are mutants, and that whole Lingard thing, how nasty those people got about that thing. They felt like a scoring lover. I like Lingard to get an assist in this game. Forrest is going to score. Lingard's going to contribute. Lingard to get an assist is plus 700. That I'm going to start writing checks as if that's already cashed. I do think Forrest, much like last week, they might be a little bit either overzealous or sometimes they'll be a little slow to react because it's Premier League, this and that. That's going to lead to cards. I like over 1.5 cards for minus 112. I think that's a virtual certainty. Forest or draw, another double chance is minus 103. I think they're going to score. I think they're going to have opportunities. They can't look worse. And I think there is going to be the combination of being back in City Ground, like that place will be buzzing. I think you're right. They are going to attack. And I do think that, Lingard is going to be at his best to get back at his old club. And then I like over 2.5 goals because I think West Ham's going to score some too. So I think over 2.5 goals is minus 108. So I think I'm going to take all 4 of those bets. And the only one I really care to hit is Forest or draw. So that's kind of where we are on that. Did you get a chance, Sam, to see any of that game?
Which one, the Forest game or the City West Ham game?
Either one. Like, what are your thoughts on that Forest game?
I mean,
after week 1.
West Ham and Forest playing each other is an interesting matchup this week because those two teams looked probably the worst of anybody out there last week. So it'll be an interesting, do the narratives from that week 1, do they actually translate on, or is it just sort of, week 1, a little bit of an aberration and we don't really know what's going on and, people getting their feet wet and everything. I don't know. It'll be interesting. I feel like West Ham, they can't play any worse. They were atrocious against City last week. So if they bring, if they saved all their energy last week, that they're a team to watch out for, but I just have no idea what West Ham's going to show up after basically watching them, watch City.
They were demoralized, right? Like that was such a beating. Yeah, that was such a beat. Like it felt like watching like the USA Olympic Dream Team. Like that's like they're playing Angola. Like they're so much better than anybody else. And Holland, everyone's always like, it's a little bit of an adjustment coming over from the Bundesliga to get to the Premier League. Wrong. That guy impervious to that. Like he's just like, I've been here forever. Like this is where I belong. So they looked like a team.
There was like a stat that came up after about 40 minutes where I thought they'd typed the wrong thing on the screen. So I think West Ham had 30 passes and Man City had 340. I've never seen such a one-sided game in the Premier League. Even ones that have been high scoring, I've never seen such like statistics off a game that made it so abysmal. And my only hope is West Ham were bad, because otherwise the league's in for a bit of a shock with City this year, right? I think this could be one of the most ones. Yeah, exactly. If we're not careful. So yeah, I'm clinging on to that hope that West Ham were bad and they're going to stay bad this week.
Yeah, along those lines, I'll throw this out there. We're not really going to talk about the City Bournemouth game much, but I do like City to hang a number on Bournemouth this week. And if you can get, I saw you can get City over 3.5 at plus money. I think plus 115. I think that's an absolute sort of just take it to the bank. I think they win that game like 5-0.
I've added that to my card. The card is, I'll hold it up. It's a full page of just different bets that I like for this weekend. Like I said, I love the board. The other one that I kind of like too, and Dan, you just mentioned them as a team. Oh, they love analytics, and that's annoying. Forest are an analytics-driven club now too. But Brentford Brentford plus 280 against Manchester United. Another team, Manchester United. That to me is like, yeah, Manchester United, they should win that game maybe, but plus 280 is enough value to at least take a stab at it. It's not like Brentford's bad. Man U seems like they haven't figured out anything yet in terms of their window. That's been like one of my favorite things to follow Man U fans on Twitter being like, we're Manchester United. We've signed fewer players than Forest, and now we're going to give them Jimmy Garner too. Like, they're having a meltdown after 1 week. And I think Brentford has, I think Brentford plus money, plus 280 is worth a shot there. What do you guys think about that?
Just a shot in the dark. You know what? I don't mind it as a value pick because anything is possible with United right now. The only thing that I think they have going for them this summer has been the fact that Barcelona has been an even bigger clown fest. So I think United's just business and the toxicity that has not really left the locker room at this point. It's just not. They'll figure it out. I actually do believe that they just have enough money to eventually get it right, but it's going to take a little while, and that team is still in turmoil. And so I think you're right. Anything is possible with them at the moment.
Well, it does sound like they're going to get cucked by Chelsea for Frankie de Jong now too.
It would not. It does seem, the rumors do seem to be pointing in that direction, which would be a great move for Chelsea, by the way.
Yeah, it would. But it's just like it felt like they had their whole window based and wrapped around that. Like, we can't do anything until we secure Frankie de Jong. But it's like, we don't want to pay what you guys already owe him.
And then they still got the Ronaldo problem. It's not a good time for United right now.
Brentford's at home. Just saying that too. Brentford plus 280 at home against a team that's in shambles, new coach, not enough players. The Ronaldo thing, like you said. Dan, are you interested in that plus 2? I might just bet every single.
Yeah, and Brentford as well. They were 2 down to Leicester and they came back last weekend. So they are capable of scoring goals, and that was away from home as well. So I think there's value in that. The only thing that probably goes against it is what Sam was saying earlier around the idea of, the bounce back. United are bad. And when we say bad, we mean kind of 7th to 10th in the table bad.
I would love to be that bad.
Yeah, exactly. But that involves not losing too many in a row at any given time. Mm-hmm. So I think the on paper, it seems like a reasonable bet. United might just pull something out of the bag, even if it's a point, just because they're desperate for it.
And to point out one thing, United got a lot better in the second half when Ten Hag finally got rid of McFred in the midfield, which is just another storyline that I could go off for days on. But when they got
about 90 seconds,
when they put Eriksen back at a deep lying sort of playmaker, the team looked way different. So I'm not going to tell you on that Brentford.
Okay. What about a draw at plus 255 for that game?
Listen, as a shot in the dark, I don't. Again, anything could happen with this United squad. I just, for whatever reason, I thought they looked competent once they changed things up, and so I just don't know what to expect from them.
Okay, all right, boys. I think with that, we'll wrap up week 2 of Eat, Pray, Limbs, the EPL show. So we're going to, we'll tweet out the account. We're going to be on YouTube on the Barstool Sports book. So make sure you guys are subscribed to that. And yeah, we'll see you boys tomorrow. What we got? Yeah, Spurs all the way. Spurs this weekend.
Everybody Come on.
And they have the Portnoy deal with the devil. So anytime Portnoy puts his weight behind something, that it wins. They just win. So Portnoy being in with the Spurs, that equals W's. And
that day to be a Chelsea fan.
Yeah.
Count on it.
All right, guys. Well, that was great. Thanks a lot.
Cheers.
Cheers.